Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Okay, and as chair, I'm excuse Councilman Tumo because I understand he's under the weather, so we will make sure that the record reflects that he will not be here. Is there anybody reported for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Okay. Everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the September 30th? Chair will move that the minutes be approved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion in regards to anything that you see in the minutes from the September 30th? No. Hearing no discussion, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Minutes are approved. Please read into the record our first item.
Resolution number 2019-0254, authorizing a community development and economic development business growth and attraction loan in the amount not to exceed $900,000 to Roechling Glastic Composites for the benefit of a company expansion project to be located at 4321 Glen Ridge Road in the city of South Euclid.
And is there anyone here to speak in regards to this issue?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Michael
you.
May from the Department of Development, Economic Development Administrator.
Okay, Mr. May, please tell us why this is good for the county to be putting money into
I
this.
certainly will, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. As I said, I'm Michael May, the Economic Development Administrator for the Department of Development, and we're here today for council to consider an economic development loan request from the Roechling Glastic Composites Company. With us here today from the company is Roechling Glastic's Vice President and General Manager, Frederick Sanford. Also attending today's hearing is Michael Love, the Economic Development Director of the City of South Euclid. Roechling Glastic Composites is in the northern section of the city on Glen Ridge Road, is a component of the North American Industrial Division of its parent corporation by the name of Röchling Group, or Röchling Group, headquartered in Mannheim, Germany. The company's primary business is the production of semi-finished sheet, rod, and profile stock for fabricated components. These components are used broadly in core electrical equipment, including transformers, motors, generators, switchgears, industrial controls, distribution equipment. They are also commonly used in the electrical infrastructure for light rail systems and in thermal insulation for common plastic, rubber, and oil in oil and gas processing. The Cleveland-based Glastic company was actually founded in 1946. They were one of the first companies in the world to produce fiberglass products for commercial use. It was acquired by Roechling, the world's leading systems and solutions provider for highly specialized plastics, in 2007. So the acquisition was in 2007. Roechling Group has over $2 billion in sales annually. Upon consideration, under consideration currently right now are options for this Glen Ridge Road site's expansion, which again is where the Roechling Glastic subset of Roechling is situated. The company's deliberating right now on between a 40,000 and 60,000 square foot addition on land that it has adjacent to the present plant. You can see that that's the front door of Roechling, and then off to the east is the land that is being proposed for addition. The building costs range from, in that we're talking about 40,000 to 60,000 square feet. They range in terms of the building construction itself, $3.5 million to $4.2 million. The total project, and I will go through this, is something in the range of $9 million. And again, that shifts a little bit. It actually gets more extensive and weighty, up to maybe $10 or $12 million, depending on how many years we're talking about with regard to the purchase and installation of more and more machinery and equipment if this project is successful, especially on its larger option. The company is asking for local support via funding incentives that will convince corporate leadership to invest in doing the larger facility option described in the city of South Euclid, to strategically solidify the company's growth there, and to dissuade the company from doing an expansion of their machining and production operations in other competing locations. One that's particularly in line is in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, about 45 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. So to support this project, the city of South Euclid already is considering a tax abatement for the project of 5 to 7 years in the range of 50 to 75%. Jobs Ohio has already agreed to provide an incentive in the form of a $75,000 CAT tax rebate. Over the months, after much deliberation and analysis of the project and the long-term implications of the two options sitting before the company and this community, the Department of Development is proposing now a $900,000 loan with a 15-year term at an interest rate of 2%, with $300,000, one-third of the loan being proposed to be forgiven if the company completes the building project as promised and also satisfies its job creation requirements. The county would have, in terms of security, the county on this loan would have a first lien position on the company's real estate, which right now has no other liens from debt, and the Röchling Group would also provide a corporate guarantee. So the parent corporation or the holding company would provide a corporate guarantee on this. I'd like to remind that the department does not have a standing program or loan product that provides any portion of forgiveness for this type of business expansion project, normally anyway. Our only forgivable loan programs entail either attracting major corporate headquarters operations from outside of the county or the renovation of severely blighted and environmentally challenged structures for economic purpose. So through dialogue with county council, leadership here, our department, the executive, the development director, there is now proposed in this legislation before you utilization of the Community Development Fund, aka Casino Revenue Fund, and to provide the loans forgivable portion of this. So this is a combination of Economic Development Fund and Community Development Fund, of which Community Development Fund would be looked to provide the forgiveness portion of $300,000. This project will generate substantial return and economic impact for the city of South Euclid and Cuyahoga County. The company will create out of this project 26 new jobs within 3 years, which would increase their payroll by $1.2 million. The company currently has 104 employees at site with a payroll of $6 million. This is a union shop. About 70 workers are with the United Steelworkers Union. These are good wages and benefits for the employees. Beyond the direct jobs, just to get a little wonky here, to result from the project, our economic development software, the jobs EQ that we use, is also looking and reading that this expansion would create about 17 indirect jobs with compensation of $1.4 million and 10 induced jobs. So those are the jobs that the employees create by buying and using shopping and retail and eating. So that's another compensation of $590,000. All told, the project is expected to generate then new income taxes of over $65,000 annually. We project that the annual sales tax would be increased by $5,700 per year, and that the county would also receive a one-time sales tax benefit of over $94,000 through the purchase of materials and other taxable purchases related to the construction project itself. In analyzing the company's financial reports, which we do normally, we always look at the last 3 to 5 years of the company's financial situation. The department and the CCCIC Loan Review Committee were very comfortable with the companies that they reviewed the loan request on October 30th, very comfortable with the company's capacity to repay the loan. Röchling's income after tax last year was almost $2.2 million. And this year to date, I'm talking 3 quarters now of 2019, it's actually almost right now $2.3 million. So again, their kind of net operating, net income to be able to pay debt is very, very strong. The company actually has no debt other than what we're talking about here. The county's appraised value of the Roechling South Euclid plant property is over $2.5 million, giving us a loan to value ratio of only 36%. So again, the value of the real estate just in our own appraisal records shows that it's extremely great security for us over and above the loan that we'd be attaching to it. I just like to go through a couple of sort of visuals and a little bit more detail about the sort of the overall picture of this thing. Again, this is the situation with the existing company and plant there, and that's the expandable site that is again being looked at for the two different options. As I said, it's at 4321 Glenridge Road. The project, I won't repeat all this, but again, it's this 40 to 60,000 square foot facility with a range of $3 to $4 million of cost. And then we are talking about the outfitting of that building and that facility with racking systems, lift trucks, IT, all of the rest, which adds up to about $2.2 million. With additional machinery and equipment, the actual manufacturing equipment, and so on, the total project, when you look at the whole ball of wax, and again, this is over the course of about 3 years, would be $9.4 million. And again, it's creating 26 new very good jobs over the next 3 years. The parent corporation has a machining facility in Mount Pleasant, as I said, near Pittsburgh, that is also vying for this expansion and the Röchling Group's financing, corporate financing and approval. So if the South Euclid site is successful in building the case to do the larger 60,000 square foot expansion, there actually would be an opportunity to potentially consolidate, sort of get things skewed. It's not absolutely guaranteed, but a skewing of what some of what the PA machining facility and so on are doing into this venue in South Euclid. It all boils down to the low interest loan was something that the company desired, with some forgiveness, to be enough to reduce the financing costs to build out the full 60,000 expansion and convince the overall parent that this is the place to do this, the larger thing, so that this can be a platform for, obviously keeping the operations here, creating new jobs, but also giving a sort of good opportunity to possibly pull some of the things that are going on in the Pittsburgh area. On the converse of that, again, as I said, the machining facility, and they get they garner the corporate financing, and they get what they're looking for in the way of expansion. There is a competition here; it's legitimate, and they actually. I will let Mr. Sanford go into this in further detail, but there are possibilities that if South Euclid is sort of diminished or doesn't get that full platform, that the pull could go the other way, and that's current jobs could be pulled to Pennsylvania. So the support from the county and the state and the local communities, we feel, will ensure the larger option that gets built, and that this will be a great platform for obviously Roechling being well invested in South Euclid and in Cuyahoga County, but more than that, creating a great platform and boost for actual future growth. That again. Mr. Sanford can go into this, but they're projecting substantial increases in revenue and sales and profit based on this scenario of the future growth curve. I don't even know if you can see this very well, but these are just basically the two options side by side, the 40,000 and the 60,000. So one is at the bottom of the column off to the right. There are the two price tags for those two build outs. This is what it looks like. This is the rendering of the facility. Down at the left is the site plan. Up in the upper right-hand corner of the site plan is the footprint of the expansion, the proposed expansion, and the off to the right are pretty clear indication of what it's not too complicated. The sources of this would be largely, if not all, in the early going from the corporate parent for the various components of this project that again add up to $9 million if you include, or when you include, a starting package over the next 3 years of $3 million of plant equipment and machinery. We are in this mix by virtue again of this $900,000 loan, and it sort of is the final incentive to make this happen here and provide the funding that will get the costs over the hump and get the big thing done. Jobs are really good. They are machine operators and warehouse people and engineers and technicians. Good salaries. The lowest salaries are the $40,000 ones, and those are at $19, $20 an hour. We reach up to $28, $29 an hour. These are just the kind of jobs that our programs try to shoot for. They're sustainable, they're meaningful wage, and they're not. This is going to $900,000 mean that we're spending about $34,000 per job created, which is in our within our benchmark of how much we put toward a job created. The terms are via the $900,000 loan from the two funds. It would be a lower interest, 2%, a little bit lower than what we normally do. As I said, the terminal loan will be 15 years. It will be fully amortizing with principal and interest paid according to a 15-year amortization schedule upon satisfaction of the actual completion of the project, which we certify, and also the certification of the jobs over the course of the 3 years. $300,000 of the loan principal would be forgiven at the end of that year 3. Very good, as I said, security and collateral on this. We'll have a priority lien on the company's Glenridge Road real estate, and we will have a corporate guarantee from the big parent. That'll do it. I'm open for questions. Again, as I said, one thing that Mr. Sanford does have a PowerPoint and a full sort of presentation on the company itself and its business and the ins and outs of not only Roechling Glastic but the overall parent, and sort of give you a history of that company and what they're doing there, what they're making, which I can sometimes barely explain.
Why don't we get first questions that might relate to the financing and security from the committee? Are there any questions from the committee on financing and security? Okay, well, the chair will ask a few. I can't let you off hook that easy. Why only 2%?
Again, it was viewed in the early going, and Councilwoman Simon was in these early discussions, and Mayor Wheelo, and the company itself was basically, and again, we're talking about two parts of this story. We're talking about the local entity that is working with its parent to get it to decide whether this giant corporation is going to infuse the kind of resources and capital to do the scenario that they were looking for. Not surprisingly, when that sort of scenario is at play, there's a look-see to see whether the community is looking for or willing to do some incentivization of a project like this and outcompete others. So we basically came up with a package that really was just the two components. One was the forgivability portion, which again, we didn't feel it should go over a third. And again, there's, as is usually the case, there's even resistance to sort of loan. And can we do a little bit something on that as well, which also again would reduce costs and be convincing to the overall corporation. And so we settled in on a 2%. Interest rates are starting to come down a little bit. So I think 2% is palatable for us. So that's essentially the reasoning behind it.
Well, it's slightly higher than our investment portfolio, so that's.
It is.
Everything above our investment
Correct.
portfolio, we theoretically make money on.
It's a touch
It's close.
Close, and it's a touch lower than our 3% that we're right now, so.
In the 15 years on a flat rate is better than what you would get from a bank or any.
Yes, sir. Yes,
as far as
certainly
they're only out 7 to 8 with a balloon at the end of that.
Correct, and we're securitized on that loan. The reason we're doing 15 years is because we're securitized by the real estate itself.
Yeah, you said we'll be the only security on the real estate?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Wow, that's as good a position I've ever seen out there. I couldn't tell from the slide, on the expansion slide, whether that was the 60,000 square foot.
I believe
or
it's
40.
the 60,000.
I couldn't tell from the slide.
That's the full, I'm sorry, what happened? Yeah,
Getting
so
a
I got a
nod.
nod, that is
Okay.
the full,
You
that's
got
the
a-
big.
okay, you got a
That's the
lifeline?
big option,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
and it does, I know this because it was out there and it really, that goes to the edge of the site fully.
Yeah,
so.
I just couldn't tell by reading. I kept reading as quick as I could to see which one it was in regards to that. Any time this community can hopefully take away a victory from Pittsburgh, we're always thrilled about that. So
I thought that would be a little bit of an incentive.
yeah, well, we haven't won it yet. It sounds like sounds like with our 2%, 15
Well, we
years.
just won, Mr. Chair, and then it didn't go well on Thursday, so.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this one here.
Yeah.
This is the one that relates to me,
Yes,
because the more success we
More-
have in
way
this
more
town, the better off
substantial.
we are, right?
Yes.
Okay, and based on the questions from the chair, are there any other questions from anybody? No? Mr. Sanford, is he,
If you're, yes, if you, for 5 minutes, Mr.
is it
Sanford.
appropriate to have Mr. Sanford next, or is it to have Mr. Love next, or are they both speaking?
Perhaps.
You tell us.
Michael Love could come up from the city just
Okay,
to sort of.
and why don't we get the city to
illustrate
do that while we can be bringing up the
Great.
slide? How's that? Because I know from an efficiency standpoint, I think Mr. Sanford has a flight to Germany, so let's get his slides ready to go, and Mr. Love can cover the economic development aspects of South Euclid.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, again, expansion is really important to our Monticello Green Industrial Corridor. We really have 2 anchor companies in that district, Aero Controlex, which is a division of TransDigm. So the parent company, TransDigm, is based here downtown. And then, of course, Roechling Glastic is our other anchor business in that industrial corridor. Both are in our top 10 employers. And with the addition of this 26 new jobs and 60,000 square foot facility, it will push Roechling Glastic into our top 5 employers. So it is a very significant expansion project for South Euclid, and being that South Euclid is predominantly a bedroom community, 26 new high-wage jobs is very significant for us. Our City Council Finance Committee met last week and heard from Mr. Sanford on the project and what is being proposed. The project has also received all of its necessary approvals from our boards and commissions, and they are at the point where if they proceed with the 60,000 square foot project, we would just have to issue, building permits from the building department. Our finance committee for council is meeting again tonight at 6 p.m. To consider the actual abatement offer, which again is going to be 5 to 7 years, 50 to 75% is what's proposed. And the plan is to introduce that legislation officially on first reading at the November 25th City Council meeting. And the goal is to have something passed from South Euclid City Council by December 16th, which is the last meeting of 2019.
Question for Mr. Love? Yes, Ms. Bailey?
I think this is appropriate to ask you. I don't know, what exactly is your business? What do you do? What is it that Roechling I see it's, can I ask him or no?
This is South Euclid, this is the Economic
Oh,
Development Director.
sorry.
We'll
I
have
wasn't
him-
sure.
We'll have
Sorry.
Mr. Sanford up here just next.
So, okay,
Yeah,
there's a,
he'll
there's
definitely
a
be able
heads
to
up of what
provide
I'll be
a
asking.
better explanation than I would.
These are
Yes.
questions for South Euclid and what
Sorry.
they're doing, because it's always important to find out how is the local community participating in this. So it sounds like it's a pretty wide window that you're going to be discussing. If it's 50 to 75%, that's obviously a 50% differential. I'm not trying to negotiate on behalf of Mr. Sanford or not for, but do you have any idea which way you're leaning?
So if it was the 50%, it would be for the longer term, 7 years. If it was the shorter term, 5 years, we'd be looking at
Gotcha.
75%.
Okay, so-
It's just how we spread it out for the school district primarily.
Because that's what I was going to ask next, the 5 to 7, but you're telling me the 5 relates to the 50%, or the 75%, and the 7 relates to the 50%.
Correct.
Okay, for the tax abatement. Mm-hmm. I'm sure somebody at Roechling has crunched some numbers. Is it at their request or your presentation that they'll go that way?
It was somewhat mutually discussed.
Okay. All right. Well, and you have no doubt that there will be one of those two options presented and offered to them, or very little doubt. I know you can't speak for the politicians
Right.
who have to vote on something, but
It was very well received last week by City Council. So
Okay.
we have very high confidence.
okay. Any other questions from
Question on
Mr.
that
Yes.
then. So, the abatement would then, of course, be a detriment to the schools. Do you make them whole with the income tax of the new jobs?
So we're talking with the schools about potential income tax sharing with the addition of the income taxes that will be seen from the jobs. They wouldn't necessarily be made whole, but we're talking with them about at least cutting their loss to about 25% of what they'd be giving up.
And are they open to that? Because I know they try to fight a lot of these abatements that impact their revenue.
So far discussions have been positive.
Okay.
But the school board is only giving up if this goes forward, and it's only the differential of the increase. Today, if it didn't go forward at all, they would not be getting or giving up either one.
Right. Yeah, that's
Okay,
correct.
so, yeah, it's only on the portion of the increase, so it's not, the net is they're going to gain over what they currently have. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, Mr. Sanford, do we get our slides up?
We do.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think we're good. Fine.
But I've always known the company is Glastic for as long as I can
Yeah.
remember.
So
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak briefly before council this afternoon. Mr. May has done a very thorough job of explaining the project, so I don't think I want to go back through all those details again. But maybe give just a little context to our company,
Please.
our history within the community, and why we want to do this project. As Mr. May explained, Roechling is a large privately owned German company. They started in 1820. They started in coal and moved on to steel, moved into specialty plastics in 2006. So completely out of steel since 1978. If you see here, you can see some rough figures on the company, 2.1 million euros in revenue globally, 11,000 employees roughly, 90 locations around the world in 25 countries. We have 3 divisions. That's a key point, 3 divisions. And you can see here that their revenue is very heavily weighted towards Europe. One reason why expansion in North America is very important to them is they see the Americas as a big area of growth for them in the next 10, 20, 30 years. This is a very simplified version of our company structure. The Roechling AG sits on top, of course. We have an automotive division. Those of you who go back and forth between Akron may have passed our sister automotive facility off the highway there, Roechling Automotive. They have also 2 facilities in Mexico, another one in Duncan, South Carolina. You have the medical division, which is the newest to our corporate family, our proverbial third leg of the stool, so to speak. We're building that up slowly. And here in the United States, the presence is small. We have one operation in Rochester, New York, and another in Denver, Pennsylvania. And then you have the industrial division. The industrial division was the first to have presence here in the United States. Actually, this Pittsburgh operation that we're talking about was the very first footprint that Roechling had in North America. Within the industrial, we have a thermoplastics division, a machine parts division, and a composites division. And in Cleveland, we represent the North American headquarters for the composites, shall I use business unit as the term within the industrial division. Now, the Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania operation is also a machine shop. That's where our organization gets a little bit confusing. But the reason for this is this facility is predominantly making parts from thermoset composite materials for the electrical market, which is our main market. So, Councilwoman Baker, if you go to your first question, which I presume you still want to have answered, we produce rigid insulating materials for core electrical equipment. We would define that for the materials that come out of the factory, specifically in Ohio, medium and low voltage motors, transformers, switchgear, busbar system, the entire electrification of any subway system, and then that also expands to thermal insulation applications as well. But the great majority of it is for electrical insulation. So when you're in New York City, or I presume also here in Cleveland, and you're near the third rail, you're kept safe because our composites are between you and the third rail, okay? Both the Mount Pleasant facility and the Cleveland facility have a big space problem. Mount Pleasant has a great deal of goods and inventory that we would be selling directly to our customers, aside from the legacy of the Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania operation. If we get the 60,000 square foot expansion, we will assimilate that inventory. We will then become the primary supplier to the Pittsburgh operation. As they grow their machining operation and run out of space, this is the point in time where we start to talk about, do we expand in Cleveland or do we expand in Pittsburgh? Reason being, it's not clear from this, but you see you have a composites business unit, a thermoplastics business unit. This Mount Pleasant operation services both. And it's always a complex internal discussion financially on who's getting the allocations and the corporate taxes and the this and the that. And at that point in time, the discussion would be separating those two units, keeping the thermoplastics in Pittsburgh and moving the composites portion of that to Cleveland with a new facility there. That'd be what we would be putting on the table and being strongly pushing for. The reverse would be that many of the stuff that many of the products that we provide today to Pittsburgh, the decision could be, if we don't have the space, to move the equipment that we have proximate to their facility, shortening that supply line and reducing those costs, which is what we're trying to avoid. Let's talk about the history of the company. Glastic was founded in 1946. These two gentlemen, Dick Neufer and Roger White, were partners. Roger was actually a member of the Manhattan Project. They were introduced to fiberglass at Owens Corning in Toledo in 1946. It was being used as ballistic protection on the fuel tanks for World War II aircraft. They were the first, I believe, in the country to practice fiberglass technology commercially, long before MFG and the Corvette. All right? They invented most of the technology that people use to produce even advanced composites today around the world. So it's been part of this community for a long time, and they were real innovators and leaders in synthetic materials in their time. Roechling acquired the company in 2007. At that point in time, we were really financially at the lowest possible point we could be, and those that know our history know that we also had a 2-year strike with the union. So the Roechling company acquired us, and they have been little by little reinvesting in the renaissance of this company, and we're on a good track now. And we desperately need this new space to realize our next 5-year plan, which is 40% growth of the business. We practice now. We've done more. At one point in time, we actually molded the base of the Singer sewing machine in that facility. We don't do any molding anymore. As companies get into hard times, they tend to spin off some of the better parts to generate cash, and that happened in our case as well. But we still practice the original process, which on the left here is the compression molding of wet fiberglass sheet, plywood, if you will. And then we practice also Pultrusion. In fact, we're one of the inventors of this process, where very similar to plastics extrusion, but you have to grab onto the hard end and pull it through the process. So it's kind of like pulling a rope through an eye. We pull glass and mat through a resin bath and through a die to get a continuous profile. And these are the kinds of profiles that you can see produced in our plant today. You talk about transformers. This is the core for an industrial transformer. You see there are 3 cylindrical core elements. What you don't see is each one of those core elements is made up of hundreds of copper magnet wire windings, each winding insulated from the other using our materials. When you break this down to its core elements, it's hard to tell if there's more copper or more fiberglass in that transformer. Okay? And then you can see the red sheet in between the core elements. So our products are also used there. And then, of course, we have a habit of putting metal boxes around things like this. Before you put the metal box around it, you have to completely frame this out with our products so that when you go to turn the switch or touch that metal box, it's safe, right? So the equipment wouldn't function without us, and it wouldn't be safe to use without us. We do thermal insulation in processing. A new market for us outside of the infrastructure of the subway is components on the vehicles themselves. So these outer panels are panels that are pultruded in our facility and also our German facility, machined in Pittsburgh and assembled in California for the Siemens Corporation. And more aluminum is being replaced by fiberglass in this way. So this is a big new diversification for us. And then one of our newest products, which, if you remember my story, was also one of the first uses, is ballistic sheet. So we produce ballistic panels in our facility today, which are sold into industrial, commercial, and institutional applications. In fact, could very well be behind the countertop that you sit behind right now. And then you saw this picture before, right? So this is our facility. This does show the 60,000, not the 40,000 square feet. We are already clearing ground and preparing, but we have to make a decision here pretty soon on whether we go to the 60 or not. There will be a minimum of 26 new jobs. We certainly hope it's going to be more than that if our growth plans accelerate as we intend them to. CapEx over a 5-year period is going to be $12 million in addition to the cost of the building itself. That's for new equipment and new software to make us more efficient and more competitive. We have promised 40% growth of our revenue, which must be at least 60% improvement in our profits. So what you also don't see here in the projections is as we get more profitable, all those tax numbers increase. And we desperately request support to help get this over the finish line and done. With that, any more questions for me?
Questions from the committee? Anyone? Ms. Simon, do you have any? I know this is in your district. You got any comments?
Thank
for-
you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the team from South Euclid and Fred. I don't have questions, but I just want to say that this would be extremely important to a city like South Euclid that as Mike Love said, is landlocked. I mean, we're a bedroom community. We don't have the access to the highways that other communities have. And it's this to us relative as having a headquarters. I mean, relative to the other projects we've given loans to. So this would just be transformational to the city of South Euclid. And we, appreciate the partnership with this company from the day I was elected to a city council person, and just good community partner. And I just ask for the support of this council, and 26 jobs will go a long way. And I want to thank you for coming down with this presentation.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, when you talk about composites, can you tell me what it's a composite of?
So this composite is continuous fiber glass with primarily polyester, thermosetting polyester resin. We do use some vinyl ester resin systems for higher temperatures and for chemical resistance in certain application areas. But that's the core of what we do today, but could also include epoxies and phenolics and urethanes in the future.
I'm sure that cleared it up, didn't it? Whoa, that was.
Does that help?
We just had a chemistry lesson, I think, more than anything else. But
You're talking about a combination of glass and fiber.
Fiberglass and plastic.
And plastic, okay. Okay, and just a comment that what I like about this project is that it's core manufacturing. We actually don't get that many projects that are just basic manufacturing, and so I like that part. Thank you.
Ms. Simon and I had a chance to tour it. It was very impressive, and a lot of people working, and a lot of things moving, a lot of moving parts. A couple questions from the chair. If the 60,000 foot were to go forward based on all the different financing pieces here, will it be capable of absorbing those machining jobs that you were talking about that would be on the composite side? Is it big enough, or would you have to do a second expansion?
It would be a second expansion that would be necessary.
Okay,
Right
so
now we're creating space to put equipment in, to create the capacity to execute the 5-year plan. And that next plan would be more space, but it would be the same in Pittsburgh as well. So it would be a here versus there decision.
okay,
And if those machining jobs are right beside the factory, then we have some real efficiencies in the supply chain because product is coming out the factory, across the street, into the machine shop.
and you're warehousing those parts, at least as I understood it. You're going to be warehousing them here in South Euclid.
All the raw materials.
The raw materials, so that the shipping would just go from there right to the machining side, which would be less handling, I would assume.
Anything that would be coming in from Europe would be a container right to our door. That's correct.
Okay. You have rail service back there?
Not anymore.
Okay. With that, then, it just seems to me that securing the real estate for 15 years is a fairly long period of time for what would be a relatively fairly small investment by that point. Mm-hmm. If you're out there, if you're looking at 5 years from now, is it the intent that you would, if you would expand, do you have the property to put that machining building on there?
There is land. There is land aside from our property. It used to be Glastic owned land at one point in time. It is now owned by the city of South Euclid. And of course, that is a discussion that would have to be finalized later, but it's my understanding, it's our understanding,
Okay.
that under the right conditions, that could be the place to do this.
And that's you've already approached Mr. Love with that concept and that topic, I assume? Mm-hmm. And they're amenable to that, at least not to negotiate on behalf, but all right. And I don't know if you are aware, Mr. Carter was at the last Economic Development Committee meeting, and there was a discussion about rail cars being considered to be manufactured right here in Cleveland. I don't know if you've seen that, but it would be new lightweight rail cars to be shipped and used throughout service.
We're talking about shipping containers or rail
No.
cars
We're talking about the exact same kind of rail car that you showed in your picture that is being under consideration.
I didn't know that.
Yep, the light rail system that is being discussed, and
Or an expansion of the existing system.
no, brand new products that would go to California and places like that. So it would behoove us to, if we could own that market here, it would be an exciting partnership between Glastic, Roechling, and this company. It's run by, I think, a couple colonels out of the military that are retired, and might want to talk to Mr. Carter about that.
Okay.
Any other questions from anybody in regards to this? Mr. May, you want to grab the mic then and give us a heads up as to where we are on the thank you, Mr. Sanford. So this is just being voted out with the second reading for
Yes, Mr.
traditional?
Chairman. Yes.
No other special requests?
We
Okay.
would see second reading on the next Tuesday,
Okay.
and then we're fine with it.
So
going to
December
third reading
vote
December
for a
10th.
third reading is fine.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Is there a motion from anyone to move this to the second read? It's been moved. Is there a second? Come on, I gotta get a good second
Yeah,
on this.
second.
Okay, on this side. All right. It's been moved and seconded.
Can we reverse that?
Any other discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of moving this for second reading, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. May. Congratulations,
Mr.
Stanford, and have a pleasant flight back to over to Germany in a little bit. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Coming in, Mr. Love also. Thank you. Okay, we have another item for the agenda. If we could read this into the record, that'd be great.
Resolution number 2019-0255, authorizing an economic development loan in the amount not to exceed $1,500,000 to ARC Impact Program.
Okay, and is there someone here to speak on this?
Ashley, how do I do full screen? Sorry. Ted will come forward in just a moment.
Okay.
As soon as we get our slides.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. Thank you for your approval of that last loan, and Ms. Simon, I'm thrilled that this project is in your district and in South Euclid. So presenting now a loan to an entity, a third-party entity called Arctaris, but the technical legislative name is Arc Impact Program, LLC. And would like to walk you through, so Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'm going to tag team this with Mr. Hurdick. Ms. Pomerantz has had me in meetings all day and haven't had a lunch, so I want to, important meetings, I might add. So we're going to tag team this and also ask our Arctaris team to come up. And we'll just ask that you hold your questions, given the innovative nature of what we're requesting and it's somewhat complex, that you let us do our presentation. I know typically we like to do a pause. You ask us questions before inviting the entity that's receiving the loan. But in this instance, what I ask that you allow us to go together so you get the totality of what we're requesting, and then ask whatever questions you'd like of my team and the Arctaris principals.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this loan is to Arctaris. They're a, what am I supposed to hit here? This here? Clicker, okay. There we go, okay. So as you know, last year we worked with a series of local partners, Greater Cleveland Partnership, the Gun Foundation, the City of Cleveland, and the Fund for Our Economic Future to submit to the state our proposals to maximize the number of opportunity zones that were designated in Cuyahoga County. This is a new federal program that's structured to incentivize private sector capital in distressed areas. We were successful in having 64 zones designated, which you see on your screen before you. In 2019, now that we have gotten the loan portfolio squared away, we're really focused on becoming more innovative and offensive with respect to achieving some of the principles in our 5-year plan. And this proposal reflects one of those, and that is attracting external capital to Cuyahoga County. And so through the fund, we were connected with Arctaris, and their two principals are here today, Jonathan Tower and Uche Osuje, who are worked with the Treasury Department in the state of Michigan, have set up a new fund in the state of Maine that really is to bring private sector capital, private sector patient capital to communities that traditionally have not been the recipient of market-based capital. And I stress patient because that is the key variable here. The purpose of this partnership between the county, and we are serving as a lead investor in this effort, and it was structured to leverage additional private sector capital. So our dollar will be matched by a minimum of $5, but as much as $10, which we'll go through. And we have some, the way we structured this, there's some incentives for Arctaris to achieve the maximum amount of equity that they deploy into the county. The principal focus will be on opportunity zones. It's companies based in opportunity zones, but they've also agreed to create a debt instrument, which will be for any geography inside Cuyahoga County. During the course of our discussions over the last year, it was fortuitous that through the Paradox Prize work, I had the opportunity to meet with Ken Patsy, who is the CEO of Manufacturing Works. And so we have evolved this initiative further, where this will focus on manufacturing companies within opportunity zones. And Mr. Chairman, you and I talked about this briefly. There's more manufacturing companies in opportunity zones than you and I realize. And so he has mapped his client base. He has over 2,000 companies that are part of Manufacturing Works, the previously known as WireNet. And so Mr. Hurdick will show you the map where we plotted these companies. And Mr. Patsy has been in early discussions with Arctaris about how to co-invest their capital toward manufacturing clients. And so the opportunity zone approach, which is outlaid here, which I've mentioned already, is a tax incentive for new equity investments. And so because this is patient capital with a social impact mission, we believe there will be broader benefits to the co-investment of our leveraged capital. And this is a loan, and I think I said that already. This is a loan to Arctaris. So similar but different from what we've done with ECDI, National Development Council, to an extent Jumpstart, although that's a different model. And so there is a predicate for our request. And so the two goals that are listed here to incentivize social impact projects, and that can include community benefit around affordable housing, livable wage jobs, public sector investment around broadband infrastructure and other things that have broader community benefit beyond just a simple market return. So as I mentioned, they are Boston-based. Their investors are banks and high net worth individuals who are not seeking the maximum amount of market return that an opportunity, an investment may yield, but something that is more reasonable. And they have done this previously over the last 10 years in Michigan, and they've just set up a fund in Maine, which they will go through. Here's some of the social impact scorecard that we are developing as part of the Opportunity Zone process. So over the last year, that coalition I mentioned, the fund, the city, Gun Foundation, Fund for Economic Future, and ourselves have developed a social impact model so that as part of the Opportunity platform, which is the Opportunity Zone platform for Cuyahoga County, as investors and developers insert their projects, we will evaluate them based on this criteria, and then they may be eligible for either an Arctaris investment or a separate public sector investment from either the city, county, or a local municipality. But in order to achieve that, we'd like to see benefits along these 6 dimensions. Paul, you want to come up and kind of walk through? So the baseline of our loan is $1 million, and then Mr. Hurdick will describe how we get to 1.5 and then the leverage that we expect from Arctaris.
Ashley, how do I get back to full screen?
You were just, no.
Sorry.
Beginning.
Thank you. I'll click it forward. Thank you. Members of the committee, I'm Paul Hurdig with the Department of Development. And I've worked closely with Ted over the past year as we've worked to negotiate what we believe will be a sound investment of county funds into this project. As Ted indicated, we have negotiated with Arctaris that while they will underwrite the deals, we will have the ability to review each and every deal for its social impact. This is unique. This is not something that we usually get when we negotiate a county investment into a fund. And for that reason, we wanted to emphasize to you that we are looking at the social impact factors that we've laid out in this slide. We are looking for investments that align with community goals and priorities. We are looking for investments where the company that's investing will produce accessible, quality jobs. Accessible meaning they're accessible to members of low-income communities. And we are looking for projects that will support community wealth building. If it's a housing project, we're looking for a project that creates or preserves affordable housing. It could be a project that improves health and environment, and it could be a project that improves connectivity or services. One example of this would be there could be an equity investment in actually constructing a daycare or even a school that would then obviously serve the community by having daycare or school services available. So not every investment will hit all of these goals, but these are the things we're looking at when we say, yes, we agree this is an investment with social impact. So here's the financial breakdown. What we're talking about today is a loan of county funds of up to $1.5 million into the funds that are managed by Arctaris. They have indicated to us that senior investors will put in at least $8.5 million into these funds, so that our $1.5 million loan will leverage at least $10 million available to invest. That's shown as the subtotal from county funds. We also believe that our decision to make a loan will be catalytic in that it will encourage other civic sector funders to make similar investments. We believe this will reach the level of another $1.5 million. And you're going to hear a little bit later this afternoon from Bob Jaquay of the Gun Foundation, who will indicate support along those lines. So that's why we believe that the county's loan of $1.5 million will ultimately create a fund of about $20 million to be invested. So the types of investments these funds will make, for the most part, where there's investments in the 64 census tracts that are opportunity zones, they're going to be equity investments. That's because the opportunity zone tax incentive is for equity investments. It encourages that. The types of investments we expect to see will be for growth of certain manufacturing companies in situations where the company is willing to accept equity. That means sharing ownership. There will, we believe, be situations where a company is purchased and moves into an opportunity zone. And you'll hear the Arctaris folks talk in a moment about case studies where they've done that very thing up in Michigan. We've been told by folks in the manufacturing community that there's a need for funds for succession planning, where a family-owned company is no longer going to be family-owned, where it needs to be purchased so it can remain in the community and not leave the community. And an additional area for equity investment will be in real estate, where again, the focus will be on community facilities, not high-end market rate housing projects. That's not what this fund is for. There is also the possibility of making loans from the funds, debt, and these will be either in opportunity zones or in similar areas that have need for similar types of projects in business growth or real estate.
Just make one other key point that Mr. Hurdy. One of the things that was very attractive in our discussions with Arctaris, the energy around opportunity zones, both in Cuyahoga County and nationally, has been around real estate projects principally. And so the intent of the legislation is to incentivize business growth and expansion. And so we see this partnership as a way, particularly with a focus on manufacturing entities, as a way to achieve that and not just invest in real estate projects. So if you look at the 30 or so projects that are currently in our opportunity zone portal, a lot of them are real estate related, not investments in companies. And so our objective here is to create jobs through private sector investment in companies. And so we think, again, that there's a smart new money to the county. There's some risk here, so this is a loan that has some risk. There's not a guaranteed return. Mr. Hurdick will go through that with you in a momentarily.
Thank you, Ted. And Ken Patsy is here and will speak later, the head of manufacturing works but we just plotted on a map just so we could see graphically. These are members of manufacturing works that happen to be located in opportunity zone census tracts. And you can see there's quite a few companies within the opportunity zones. So this bears out our theory that there will be opportunities to invest in manufacturing. Here's the terms of the county loan as proposed. We are proposing a 10-year term, and the reason for that is the tax incentive that comes with opportunity zones is maximized if investments are held for 10 years. So 10 years is kind of the key length of time for these investments. So for that reason, our loan is for a 10-year term. We are offering a below market rate of 2%. We will insist in the loan agreement that the county funds should be deployed within 18 months of closing. We don't want the money just sitting. We will negotiate an incentive to increase the leverage even further than the amounts we noted on the slides. And the loan is payable back to the county in full with interest at the end of the 10-year term. There is a possibility we could receive partial payments sooner if it happens that one of the projects invested in pays off sooner. So the 10 years will be the longest time. We might get some back sooner. And in terms of the question of security for the loan, this is a loan into the fund. So the fund itself will be making the investments into the businesses. There is a type of security that operates to help us, and I want to talk a little bit about this. This is a guarantee that the Kresge Foundation, National Foundation, is making to the fund itself. This is not a guarantee to the county, but I'll show in a moment how this Kresge guarantee would help us under some scenarios. So these are the basic terms of the county loan. I'm just showing here graphically, these are a couple of possible investment scenarios. I want to stress these are possible. We are not in any way directing the fund what types of deals to find. These are just some possibilities. If you look in the chart, the blue bar is how much county funds goes into a deal. The red bar is how much comes to other investors. The green is the total. And the point is just to illustrate that in every transaction the fund makes, our funds, the county funds, will be leveraged so that there's a greater impact than just the county funds. Types of investments might be an expansion of a business, a purchase of a business, a real estate deal, and investment to attract a new business, and then the total shown on the right, just hypothetically. This slide's kind of dense, I apologize, but we wanted to show you with some facts and figures some of the scenarios about how the county gets paid back, because since we're making a loan, we know one question is, how does the county get paid back? So if you take a look at our first column, we call that performing. We're making a hypothetical assumption here. We don't know how each investment will do, but suppose the investments do rather well, so that out of a $10 million investment, $14 million comes back to the fund. In that case, if you read down, there's $14 million available to distribute. We get our $1.5 million loan and our interest back. That's $1.8 million. We're paid in full. The rest goes to investors. Next scenario we looked at is in the middle. We call that a break-even scenario. In this case, the investments the fund makes don't do quite so well. What comes back into the fund is exactly what went out, $10 million. There's $10 million that went in, $10 million comes out. That's all that's available. So in that case, we, the county, would get our loan back, $1.5 million. The investors would get back their investments. Nobody makes any money under that scenario, neither us nor the investors. And then the third column shows how the Kresge Foundation guarantee would help to protect us if things don't go quite so well. So if you look at the third column, we're looking at those same four investments. They don't return quite as much money. Now there's only $9.7 million in the kitty. The fund started with 10, ended up with 9.7. Does that mean the county loses? No, because the Kresge Foundation steps in to close that gap for $266,000. So the Kresge guarantee in this scenario is keeping the 10 million where it was. Everybody gets their money back. We get our original money back. The investors get their money back. And again, the point of this is to illustrate that while we don't have an ironclad, rock-solid, large personal guarantee, we have a form of security that helps to cushion some of the risk on our loan that we're making. And that's the end of my presentation.
It is different.
Oh, we'll do the other one. Yes, sir.
While we queue this up and bring up the Arctaris team, I'd like to make two other points that I think are important. One is that our evaluation engagement with Arctaris has been with our partners that I mentioned earlier. There has been debate among the group, to be transparent, about the demand for equity in this marketplace. And so this will be tested through our partnership with Arctaris. There's some members of our coalition who believe that we have sufficient capital here. There's others who view there's not enough equity to supply the company. So this is an ongoing discussion we've had with each of our capital partners that you've approved funding for over the last couple of years. I think what's unique here is that this team, Jonathan and Uche, have really been persistent and insistent that Cuyahoga County is a place where they can deploy capital successfully, make a return for their investors along their return parameters, which are different than market rate given the structure of the fund. And so that was very appealing to the executive, to me personally, to members of our team, to have someone knocking on the door say, we want to come to Cuyahoga County, which is part of our strategy. So this is also a gateway to their investors to take a look at Cuyahoga County. It's also a gateway to companies that they have relationships in other parts of the country. And so that part of our strategy here and working with them is to let that be an attraction strategy to recruit those companies to come to Cuyahoga. So in their presentation, you'll see some examples of where they've done that successfully in Michigan. And so, unfortunately, we were in discussions with a company that Mr. May and his team over a year ago were talking to, and we were in discussions and had submitted an LOI. I can't disclose that at this point. Coincidentally, they were evaluating the same company. It's a company that you all would know in the manufacturing space. So that would have been terrific to be able to say that we were prepared to co-invest in that company with this fund, but the timing of that and the underwriting process did not work out. So with that, let me bring up Jonathan Tower and Uche Osuji and have them walk you through there. And then we'll also have Bob Jaquay is here just to talk about the gun commitment. I'll talk a little bit about another major bank that is interested but has not yet committed. And so, again, our capital is to be the catalyst for other local civic capital, match ours, and then that matches the full commitment of the Arctaris team.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and members of the council. My partner Uche Osuji and I are pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you about the social impact work that we've done in other communities and what we'd like to accomplish here in the county.
Would you mind just putting your name on the record so we...
Sure. Jonathan Tower. I'm Jonathan Tower and then Uche Osuji. Great. Thank you. So...
Do you want to do like personal intros?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you go first?
All right. Hi. Just feel it's always great to meet the person behind the suit. My name is Uche. It's a West African name. I was actually born there, and I give this context because I was born there and my parents moved here when I was eight years old. We moved into Section 8 housing, and I went to private schools. I share that context because I believe that's the lens that I use to live life, one, and that is the lens that actually brought me to our fund from where I previously worked. With that, I think you'll see my history. I did operations management with P&G for 4 years before making a shift to finance and working on Wall Street for about 13 years before joining our firm because we wanted to have more of an impact than just making companies like International Paper and others richer. So.
Great. And Jonathan Tower, prior to co-founding Arctaris 10 years ago, I worked in technology venture capital, grew some large companies during that period of time. And then during the last Great Recession of 08, 09, wanted to shift my focus. Instead of building unicorn technology companies, wanted to help revitalize disinvested communities. So became an impact investor, co-founded Arctaris. We raised a small initial fund at the bottom of the Great Recession, $20 million focused on companies and infrastructure projects located in inner cities and low-income rural communities. Arctaris Income Fund did well. Over 2 years, we made 8 LP distributions, and where we really excelled was in terms of creating quality jobs in the low-income communities that we served. 2 years later, we came back and did a second fund, 3 times the size. Same strategy, same execution. And those 2 funds, although they were nationwide funds, we wound up investing quite a bit in Michigan. Michigan had a credit crisis that all of us had, and it also had the automotive crisis. So kind of a double confluence of economic issues. We found that our capital was more needed in that community, and Michigan was also one of the largest per capita recipients of Jobs Act funding. So after those 2 funds, which both performed well financially and created a lot of good jobs, we were asked by the U.S. Treasury Department to create a pure Michigan fund. Government money put up 20% of the capital for that fund, and then our investors, primarily banks and insurance companies, put up the other 80%. The fund was designed so that the private money would get paid out first, and assuming all went well, the government would get paid last. As you might imagine, investing in Detroit through the recession, there were certain times when we were very fortunate to have that credit cushion there, but we never actually had to use the insurance policy. It was there. We slept better at night. It certainly helped us attract capital from the bank investors, but we did not actually burn into the credit cushion. During that period of time, Jacob Blue, who was the U.S. Treasury Secretary, came out to our office in Detroit, spent about 3 hours with us. We walked a factory floor together. It was a stamping plant. It's called New Center Stamping, but in the movie 8 Mile, it was called Detroit Stamping Company. It was actually where Eminem worked in the movie, and that he recognized the movie scene. What he really liked was that 60 of the employees of that stamping company were on a recidivism program, prison work release, learning vocational skill sets, so that when they returned to society, they would have some more valuable career options to work with. Jacob Blue went back to Washington, talked it up to other states, and we started getting calls from ODSA and Jobs Ohio and Business Oregon and even American Samoa saying, we would like to replicate this Michigan model with you. How do we create a similar state program that will emulate the Michigan mandate and create jobs here? So we did that. We created, this is right before Opportunity Zones, but we created a program designed to originate $500 million worth of loans to companies and infrastructure projects in low-income communities. We did that in partnership with the City of Baltimore, the Able Foundation, State of Maine. We've gotten more capital in from Michigan. So we've gotten new market tax credits from LISC. All of these participants provide that last money out capital, similar to the 1.5 that we're talking about here today, so that they could be catalytic, meaning, in other words, their capital allowed us to raise additional capital from banks and insurance companies to magnify that impact. So we launched that fund, and then Opportunity Zones started to become talked about a lot. And it seemed like something that was really novel in concept, but unlikely to get passed by Congress. And fortunately, it did get passed. I was wrong. It was passed. And 2 weeks later, I was asked to join the Federal Policy Working Group and then the Technical Corrections Working Group to make sure that the legislation was, one, attractive to investors so that there would actually be money in these funds to do some good work, and then two, to make sure that the funds would respect the intent of the legislation and actually benefit the residents of these low-income communities. There was a lot of concern that Opportunity Zones would be just a tax break for billionaires, or that it would lead to the unwanted side effects of gentrification, displacing families to make way for higher paying renters. And we were engaged in a lot of these early conversations with the New York Fed and Rockefeller Foundation, Kresge Foundation, about how do we make sure that this actually delivers the stated purpose. So in a year ago, June, Rockefeller Foundation and Kresge Foundation put out a competitive RFP process asking for proposals of what a qualified fund manager could do with a very large anchor commitment of principal protection guarantee capital from their programs. And we co-applied. Our nonprofit partner is Harvard Business School's Initiative for a Competitive Inner City. This is a nonprofit started by HBS professor Michael Porter, using his competitive strategy frameworks to think about competitive edge in inner cities. We know what the challenges are in these cities, but how do we identify companies and industries that are positioned to thrive in these areas? And so we co-applied in this competitive RFP process. And we said 4 things. We said, number one, for each dollar of commitment that Kresge and Rockefeller put in, we would match with 9 from private investors, 9-to-1 matching. Number 2, we said we'll make investments that do good. And we actually defined what good was in terms of living wage job creation, worker training, and creating pathways to prosperity in the communities we serve. 3, adhere to an anti-family displacement strategy. We're not investing in rental apartment buildings and improving them and kicking the poor families out to make pay way for renters. Never. And then 4th, complete transparency. We count our jobs, we count census tract data, we count wage data, and we're going to report that to our stakeholders. Arctaris has been doing that for 6 years already to U.S. Treasury Department and to all of our bank investors like PNC and Citizens Bank and Flagstar. But we agreed to do that in even higher level of detail for the foundation partners. In this RFP process, there were 161 applicants, including Morgan Stanley and Lisk and a number of other large institutions, and Arctaris and ICIC were selected. So we won the $15 million anchor guarantee commitment from Kresge. And soon after that, Finance Authority of Maine came in with another $10 million. Soon after that, we got a commitment for $8 million from Oregon. We're expecting a larger one from state of Washington, working with ODSA on a similar program. Able Foundation in Baltimore committed 4 last week. We've been able to build up a large principal protection base. And I think it's worthwhile kind of explaining how this works. It's an insurance policy in most of these cases where if we make an investment in the Kresge footprint, which is 50 states, or in Maine, which is obviously just 1, and there's ultimately a realized loss on those investments, we submit an insurance claim, and then state of Maine or Kresge has an obligation to reimburse us for either 90 cents or 100 cents on the dollar of that loss. Maine is not guaranteeing Vermont deals, but as you might imagine, but Kresge is guaranteeing anything that we do in all 50 states. There are a few things that are on the do not touch list, which frankly, we're not going to do it anyway. I mean, we're not going to invest in payday lenders or pawn shops or things like that. We know what we're not allowed to invest in, and it's pretty far removed from our investment strategy anyway. But the rule was very favorable, and Kresge is considering this a grant because we'll probably do 50 transactions in this fund, and not every one of our deals works out. We will lose money on something, and that insurance policy will be used. It's not the Michigan model was very different, where if one deal went bad and 9 were good, the gains from the winners would offset the losers. But Kresge is willing to pay out on the one deal that doesn't work out. So it's a de facto grant. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to point out that we haven't lost any capital whatsoever with our Michigan fund. Actually, U.S. Treasury will generate about a 15% return on it. Obviously, not what their focus was. I would love to point out that why we were chosen by Kresge is simply because when they launched that RFP, 100% of the Opportunity Zone funds that had been formed by that point were all focused on land. With land, what will happen? It will become the biggest gentrification bill ever. So Arctaris just shared with them that we're going to do what we have always done for the last 10 years. This is not new for us. We provide capital to manufacturing companies and others in low-income census tracts. With that, it probably makes sense to, bear with me, jump to some examples to give you a flavor of some of our deals. I heard Ted mention earlier that manufacturers' works is obviously focused on the transition of ownership for their 1,200 member companies. And AFCO is an excellent example whereby the company was around for about 50 years. The current owner owned it for 20, was looking to sell. There are about 3 buyers that were trying to buy this company. We backed one of them. Part of our deal with the buyer that we backed was that they would keep AFCO in Holly. Holly is a small rural town with about 6,000 people there. Although AFCO only has about 20 manufacturing jobs, I guarantee you that if the other 2 buyers had pulled AFCO out, because if you think about manufacturing, for every manufacturing job, you're supporting 3 to 4 non-jobs. But to quickly close the loop on this, because it was a 50-year company, PP&E was written down to 0. They couldn't get bank funding. And although the leverage, I'm using very financial terms, was less than 2 times, they could not get bank funding. We were able to provide funding. That was 3.5 years ago. Since then, the company is still in Holly. They now have bank funding. And I just thought this was a great example of some of the issues that we will probably be dealing with here.
Thank you. And I'm just, the risk manager in me always wants to speak up to make sure we're being crystal clear here. We expect the U.S. Treasury Department will earn 15% return. But past performance does not guarantee future results, but we do expect that we will actually be a profit center for the U.S. government. And it was a former administration that kept it, and this wasn't meant to make money for the government, but we're thrilled that that portfolio has turned out very well on the financial performance front, and then also the job side. This slide is really a view of the capitalization of our last 3 funds. The Michigan fund was 80% investment capital, 20% on the bottom. The Impact Fund, which is the one that we propose to make loans in low-income communities in Cuyahoga County, that has capital from multiple different sources. At the bottom is foundations, and then we have banks, and then we have a single bank credit line that we plan to layer on the top to grow the fund upwards of $500 million. And then the current fund is the Opportunity Zone Fund, 10% principal protection and 90% capital. This is a slide that was put together by our partners in Maine, the Finance Authority of Maine. And they've used this to explain their commercial loan guarantee program over time. This is a program that takes risk out of bank loans and other non-bank lenders' loans in the state of Maine. And they've calculated that over time, the tax revenues that the state of Maine has generated as a result of these programs have far outweighed any risks that they might have taken on the lending front. We recently presented this with Maine to the Council of Development Finance Agencies annual meeting. To jump ahead, in speaking with Mr. Carter before the meeting, we just talked about some of the things that we thought would be valuable for this discussion. Certainly, I think we've talked about the history and performance of Arctaris here. Who the investors are, I think, is relevant. Certainly, we have a lot of Ohio-based banks as partners. PNC, we're expecting KeyBank to be a significant partner in this next fund. Citizens Bancorp. And then multiple government agencies at the city, county, state level, federal from new markets tax credits, and previously from the U.S. Treasury Department, and then foundations and family offices. In Michigan, we were able to invest primarily in manufacturing companies that would create between 25 and 200 jobs. And these, just to kind of define what these companies look like, obviously they make a product, but these are companies that, they're not on the edge of a cliff. They're not startups. They're generally established companies that have an opportunity to grow. What they lack is the capital to grow. And, maybe the CEO is looking at retirement in the next 5 years, and this isn't the time to bring on a new equity partner. Maybe there's an aversion to taking on debt. Maybe, it's just a growth at a reasonable pace kind of strategy. And we embrace the strategy. We don't change that. But what we do want to do is make sure that capital access is not a barrier to growth. If your customers are saying, hey, we want to triple orders this year, we want to make sure that the company has access to be able to do that. We work very closely with the companies to make sure that they take every opportunity that they can that is profitable for the company. We have certainly replicated that strategy in other areas. And, Michigan has more automotive than, say, Syracuse. Our manufacturing companies in Native American tribal lands have very different, business objectives too. The common thread in all of these is job creation, and we count the jobs so that we can report that to our stakeholders. Mr. Carter also asked about why is there first loss capital for funds and why it works for the states. I showed the Finance Authority of Maine slide before, but really what we're trying to do is attract capital from regular investors who have a fiduciary responsibility to make money for their companies. Whether it's a bank or an insurance company, they have a fiduciary responsibility to make money, and we want to be able to attract them to invest their capital to do something good for communities. By putting that principal protection layer, which hopefully never has to be used, but by putting that in there, we reduce the risk of the overall fund so that they can participate. The general partner also has significant skin in the game. We are committing $5 million from our management team to this, and our capital is also in that last money out position. So we have to pay our investors back before we get our money back. We've made significant commitments to our other funds as well, and fortunately, we've done well with that over time. Why Cuyahoga? Well, we've certainly have demonstrated that there's a significant population of manufacturing companies here that are seeking capital. You're in a banking center, so it's better here than in places that don't have headquarters banks. But there are multiple companies that have an opportunity to achieve significant revenue growth, and they have to pass it up because the money just isn't there. And maybe what they really want is a loan, but they're only able to get equity, or maybe they want equity, but they don't want an equity partner for life. I mean, we're equity where you can buy the equity back from us at a predetermined price, and we shake hands, and then that's good. We don't need to make a home run off of this. Our objective is not to create a new global empire. We have a social impact framework that typically focuses on quality jobs creation. If we do create a minimum wage job, we don't count it. We're really looking for jobs that pay people enough so that they can afford to live in the community with their families. And if someone doesn't have those skills, then we see it as incumbent upon us to find worker training programs, either that we'll build in-house or externally, to help them get to that level where they do earn that higher wage. Our underwriting process is relatively bank-like. A lot of these companies, we're looking more at cash flow than we are at the underlying assets. Cash flow is good because it reduces the risk of a company getting into trouble in the first place. Assets obviously make nice collateral, but we're not looking at this as a liquidation scenario. We're looking at this as a company that'll probably have a few mistakes over 10 years, but we want to be able to work with them to get through those issues. Mm-hmm.
So just to touch on that process, when we see a new deal after working with them, we write a 2-page memo for our partnership. And the partnership provides a go, no go on that deal. What we have negotiated with the county is that they will be part of that go, no go mandate of our process. And they will help guide us by using this social impact framework. Why were we okay signing off on that? Because, again, this is what we do. This is why Kresge chose us out of 162 other places that reply to their RFP.
Our investment committee is made up of members of the Arctaris team, plus senior credit professionals that are seconded to us by our bank partners. Head of credit for PNC Bank sat on our investment committee for 2 years. We get people like that who bring in a ton of experience. While we want and actually rely on community participation on issues like how do we serve the community better, what are the key areas that we want to address in terms of industry and region, generally a county would not be involved in the actual number crunching underwriting process. Well, how big of a payment reserve should we be? What should the interest rate be? How do we amortize this loan? We want those types of decisions, the go-no, to be held at the investment committee level. But we do value and actually rely heavily on community participation. Even in the Michigan Fund, 3 seats of our board were held by Michigan Strategic Fund. So we do value and really benefit from that close engagement, and it helps us become better and more informed investors. And then just two last points here. Relocating companies. The first 2 transactions we did in Michigan were relocations of companies from other states into Michigan. Generally, if we note that there's an opportunity, there's a void to fill, we're going to want to find, are you clicking? We're going to want to find companies that will move to that area. We moved the RAC from Louisiana to Pontiac, Michigan. We moved another company called Moguldom Media, that all African-American digital media company in New York. We opened their Detroit presence so that they could better address the automotive industry. In both of these cases, the companies asked their prevailing banks, go to a New York bank and say, hey, I want to open a Detroit office. New York bank doesn't want to take that risk. New York company goes into a Detroit bank and says, can you give me a loan? And they say, why are you coming to Detroit looking for money? You're coming from New York. You should be able to get it there. Mm-hmm. So in these situations, we were able to create significant numbers of new jobs in low-income communities in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. So just wanted to, why is it important to focus more on manufacturing versus service companies? Moguldom Media, I don't know if y'all have ever heard of it, but I'm sure you've heard of a company called TMZ. Yeah? Okay. Moguldom is TMZ for the Black population. So they own a website like Bossip. So it's an internet company, wanted to open an office in Detroit. Although they were very, very profitable, could not get that financing. We did provide that financing. They did open an office in Detroit, employed about 10 full-time people. They were doing documentaries out of Detroit, so 75 part-time folks. But if you see here, they were actually purchased by Interactive One in 2017. And once they were purchased, because it's a service company, it's really easy to move folks back to wherever HQ is. So importance of focusing on manufacturing versus service companies. With that.
Great. I think we've gotten through the presentation with time for questions, and would love to field any questions from the group.
Ted, will you continue in it?
Yeah, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, just because, again, part of this ask is the marketplace leverage. So I'd love to have Mr. Jaquay just come up for a couple of minutes to talk about the Gun Foundation's perspective, and then have Mr. Patsy just share very briefly kind of the very preliminary discussions we're having with Manufacturing Works, ourselves, and Arctaris, and then we'll answer as many questions as you like. We know this is a slight departure from what we've done in the past. We anticipate questions that you'll have will help us refine our thinking as we negotiate, and I've shared with the Arctaris team there may be directives that come from this body that will be incorporated into our closing negotiation. So this is really an iterative product of 12 months of discussions. And so, Mr. Jaquay.
Before we get into Mr. Quay, and because you teed it up that way, are you expecting, or do you need this to come out of this committee today? It sounds like you've been working on it for 12 months. This body is catching it for the first time today.
No, we don't expect. It would be nice, but no. We know this is very innovative. It's pushing the edge of what we've done. Certainly over the last 4 years, you need to digest, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable. We'll continue to work pari passu with this team in terms of some of the fine tuning, and then anything that you add will just incorporate it, and it'll be a great way to launch 2020. But if you approve it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I think there's a lot of stuff that came at us today, and so I would rather people absorb it than try to wing it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Schron.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Miller.
Can I ask a follow-up on the question you just asked?
Why don't we wait till the end? I just want to catch that with if we can catch it. We're not. If everybody's comfortable, we're not going to be bringing this out of this committee today. That was the only thing I wanted to do. And there was doesn't sound like there's anything time sensitive in regards to it.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I could, I just wanted to ask a question of whether it's your goal to get this, get final approval before we go out of session on December 10th.
That would be terrific, Mr. Miller. So if we need to do other interim one-on-one meetings and briefings to answer questions, we'd like to do that. So we could do that. That would be ideal, if possible.
Okay.
Certainly not looking for approval or non-approval today, given the complexity and uniqueness of this.
Okay.
I would ask Mr. Schron, since we may have another hearing, the other agenda item, we'd like to defer any presentation of the London Stock Exchange until the next meeting. We're actually going to be meeting with the CEOs coming in from London on Wednesday, and a lot of the questions I know you'll have, I'll better be able to answer after that meeting Wednesday. So the timing of his visit just didn't line up. So
I think I might be with him on Friday anyway. So
okay, good deal. So you can.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for bringing back clarity to it.
Chairman Schron, may it please the committee, I am Robert Jaquay, Jaquay. I'm Associate Director of the George Gunn Foundation in Cleveland. My purpose today is to relate to you that our foundation has been working in partnership with the county and other potential civic investors in trying to put guardrails on the opportunity zone investment structure that's embedded in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that provides the significant capital gains benefits for investors that are willing to take their unrealized capital gains, sell the asset, realize the gain, but then reinvest it in one of these opportunity zones. And in doing that, we're working with our community partners to try to aggregate capital in various forms that will be useful to provide a host of different types of deals that we think can benefit our community. Our foundation, along with the county, are partners in the Fund for Our Economic Future, and at the fund, we are trying to work on the concept of reviving job hubs, concentrations of living wage plus jobs, really good jobs with quality benefits that pay good wages, that are accessible to people that live in many parts of our community that are traditionally underserved, and with the accessibility to get to those jobs without car dependence and god-awful transit commutes. And so places like the area along I-90, where certain companies are located in Collinwood and Euclid, in the Opportunity Corridor area on the east side of Cleveland and northward in the Health Tech Corridor and around the Hopkins Airport in some of the designated Opportunity Zone districts that are in some of the immediate suburbs to Cleveland and around the metro hospitals. We think that there is the potential for a restoration of the walk to work or easily accessible job locations, and we view this as a financing tool that can help us achieve that. With that in mind and companioning with the county on due diligence of Arctaris, our trustees last Thursday approved a $500,000 10-year loan with the terms that virtually mirrors those that are proposed by the county before you today. Along with Paul and Ted and Mike May, we unpacked and looked at the way that Arctaris, our new friend Uche, approaches his credit analysis. We realize that they have a very standard and sound approach. The business has to have at least 3 years of operations, revenues of at least $5 million, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, EBITDA of at least $1 million, and that creates and retains at least 8 jobs for every $1 million invested. While they propose to hold the credit analysis and the credit decisions to the company, they nonetheless have offered the ability for a local committee of advisors to have a lot of impact on or input on the social impact of each deal. We've looked at credit rating agencies, and we've looked at the Arctaris Impact Fund as being rated by the Egan-Jones rating firm as a BBB minus. That means, quote, adequate protection parameters. However, adverse economic conditions or changing circumstances are more likely to lead to weakened capacity of the obligor to meet its financial commitment on the obligation, end quote, meaning that there is some risk inherent. But as we look at the totality of being able to attract substantial new capital to our community from the national investment pools, and with the guarantees that Kresge and Rockefeller have put together in their working with Arctaris, we think that the community benefits to the Gun Foundation outweigh the risks that are inherent in the kinds of loans that are to be made. And so as a consequence, we're in with the county if you choose to go forward with this construct. So I'll be happy to join the queue and answer questions as they come up, but I know it's late and you have questions for the principal investors.
Well,
so thank you for.
We'll go with Manufacturing Works next, and then we'll be all teed up to follow Mr. Carter's suggestion. We wait until the end. So we're waiting to the end to hear about Manufacturing Works.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Ken Patesey, Patsey. I'm President and Executive Director of Manufacturing Works, and I'm happy to be here. I am here in support of the county making this investment in Arctaris. Our organization is an exclusively manufacturing-based organization. We're a membership-based organization. We work with, through our full membership as well as our program with the City of Cleveland called CIRI, the Cleveland Industrial Retention Initiative. We work with about 1,200 manufacturers, many of which are small, mid-size, most of which are. One of the real opportunities we see, and frankly also a risk, but we see really as an opportunity, is that we think that most of these businesses, a majority of these businesses will be changing hands in the next 5 to 7 years as the baby boomer owners look to transition out of those businesses. If you look at national statistics, and we think our region probably reflects those, when you look at family businesses, as they transition, about 70% of the second generation will become the business owner. Third generation, it's about 30%. Fourth generation, it's less than 10%. As you can imagine, in this area, most of these businesses are third and fourth generation. And so the family is often not the new owner when the current owner wants to transition out. Larger companies have access to resources to sell their business, private equity, investment bankers. But Small companies, of which, again, most of ours fall in the category of small companies, do not have that opportunity. It's a very undeveloped marketplace. And we see these companies sometimes just go away because they can't sell their business. And these are employers of 20, 30, 50 people. They don't make the headlines, but they happen. And in total, we think it's a major risk, but also a major opportunity if we can prevent that from happening. So we are looking together to put together an ecosystem to help these businesses find buyers and sell their companies. But a very, very important part of that equation is, so we have many sellers that are going to be coming over the next 5 to 7 years. We're working on finding buyers, but the other thing you need is capital to make those good transactions. Many of these companies today that are bought by individuals to other individuals are highly leveraged financially transactions. They use SBA loans a lot. I've seen transactions recently as high as 95% borrowed money. The problem with that, of course, is the real opportunity for new owners in buying these businesses is the opportunity to grow them, because many businesses are that size because they've been undercapitalized for a long time. So our goal is to make sure that these are well-capitalized deals so that the new owners can grow those companies, not just retain jobs in those companies in Cleveland, but actually grow them in Cuyahoga County. As was alluded to before, about 300 of the companies we work with are located in opportunity zones. So we expect there to be a significant amount of these companies looking to do this in the opportunity zones. We need capital to help us. We've met with Arctaris. We very much appreciated the meeting. We think they're very high-quality people. We think their intentions are good, like ours, which is really, we will likely try to raise a fund ourselves to add even more capital to the equation here. And we look at it as what we call accommodation capital. So we're trying to accommodate that deal to make sure that it's a good, solid financial deal so that the new owners of that business can carry forward and add to the economy, rather than the alternative, which is to have those companies perhaps go away. So, what do we bring to the equation for Arctaris? We see it as, and the county, we do see it as a partnership. One of the things that we'll help them with is, frankly, due diligence. When you go to buy a company, you want to know, is that a good investment? We know our members, we know our companies, and we know them well. So we're just looking for our members and our economy to be well supported, but we can bring intelligence to that to make sure these are also, again, good transactions and good solid companies. And so one of the challenges for a fund like Arctaris is, as they call, deal flow. Finding companies to invest in and then analyzing those companies. So by working with them, we feel like we can leverage each of our resources, our knowledge, as well as their analytical capabilities and underwriting capabilities. And so we're very excited about that opportunity, and certainly hope that the county decides to make this investment, because we feel like we can really help to leverage that for the good of the manufacturing community throughout Cuyahoga County.
Thank you, Mr. Patsy. As a disclaimer, I do serve on the board of Manufacturing Works. That was the first actually I heard that potentially is that Manufacturing Works is considering raising funds to participate in this, so I will have to recuse myself on any votes. If Manufacturing Works is going to be raising funds, it would go into that. Is that what I thought I heard you say? It wouldn't need to go into this. Oh, okay, all right, okay. Separate investments go alongside. Separate, unrelated. Okay, all right, that's good. I didn't think I heard that at any place on the board meeting before, and so if you were, then I was going to have to step back real quickly from any further participation. But I do sit on Manufacturing Works, and I'm not. My factory is not located in an opportunity zone. So put that all on the record out there. So with that, questions for? I'm sure we have a whole series of questions. As you can tell, this was drinking from a fire hose. So I don't think there's any way we're going to get done with this in 10 minutes.
Understood, Mr. Chairman.
Perhaps we should take the Arctaris's questions first, because we can always catch you two guys. So if you don't mind focusing your Arctaris questions out there. So
I just have a couple of questions.
Sure. Why don't we start here, go right down here, and then go on that way.
In the Michigan pool, I saw that you had some relocation ties in your legal commitment. They needed for a specific period of time not to leave the state of Michigan. How do you actually tie that up? Because I'm very concerned that, especially with the TMZ deal, that was a relocation to a sunny or warmer clime. And how do we limit that?
Sure. So the U.S. Treasury money in the Michigan Fund came from 2010 Jobs Act, a program called State Small Business Credit Initiative. It was a 2010 era program. And there was a statutory requirement in that program that said if a company leaves the state, they have to pay back the loan. And we mirrored that in our own loan documents. It was an event of default if they left the state. So any company that would leave needed to pay back the loan immediately, and Moguldom was no different. So they paid off the loan before they left. Unfortunate to see them go. They went to Baltimore, and they've created a lot of jobs there, and Baltimore needs it too. But
You know how we feel about Baltimore.
Almost as bad as Pittsburgh in this town.
Ravens, Steel. But I mean, manufacturing companies are much harder to move, and as Uche said, the stickiness of those jobs is really key to the social impact narrative that we want to create. They are.
My next question.
Yeah.
I think that's the best you can do is you put something in the legal agreement, but I just wanted to know what the language was previously. Of significance is that we get this is a loan to an investment pool, and the question is, how do we get our principal and our interest? Are we paid quarterly? Are we paid annually? And if at the end of the 10-year term, there is a loss because it's a BBB rating, so it's not perfect. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect. And so, yes, we are the public sector, and yes, we absorb risk when other folks won't. But what are we really looking at as a return on our investment? And how do we get that money back if you're doing it as investors and you don't always have, I didn't hear like a preferred rate of return and a way that earnings are generated and how the income stream comes back in order for you to pay us?
I guess I will answer. If you're public and I'm sorry.
And we are.
Yes, if you're public and you said, and we take risk, we are private and we're actually, GPs are behind you, right? So that's how much we trust in our process and to be able to replicate what we have done previously. So in terms of the performance-based.
You were senior capital and we were.
No, now I am talking about our personal capital. So any performance-based capital, we only get that after your capital has been returned to you.
Okay.
I also want to make sure that you're clear on the credit ratings too. The bonds that we are issuing to banks are rated BBB+.
Okay.
The county's participation would be junior and subordinated to the bank participation, and there is not a credit rating. That is not a rated instrument. So I want to be clear that what we're asking the county to do is to take a subordinated risk. This is not a market rate return.
No, that's what I wondered, but why I'm asking how we get the money.
Yeah, so we're going to originate loans in the Arctaris Impact Fund with this capital. Those loans are 5-year term. Typically, they amortize. They are to companies with typically $1 million to $5 million of trailing year EBITDA. So these are not startups. When those loans pay back, we pay off the banks, we pay off the equity, then we pay back our government and foundation partners.
So we come third?
That's right. And the reason that states and foundations have been willing to do that, because it is a risk, is twofold. One, the matching commitment. you're putting in $1.5 million and we're putting in $8.5 million, so there's $10 million going into that program alone. So number one is we're giving social impact leverage to that capital. And then number two, and I flipped through the slide pretty quickly, but that Finance Authority of Maine slide demonstrates that when FAME has taken those risks in the past, even if it lost its money, not Arctaris, but just in general, they made it back on tax revenue. So the key is that even if you went in with a loss assumption, the expectation is tax revenue and job creation is well and above and beyond the financial risk taken. We don't expect to lose your money, and we are investing our own money in this fund too, and we would be losing money there as well if you lost money. So important to note that our interests are aligned there.
Your money's after ours.
Right.
Coming out.
Right.
Your personal money.
Our personal money. Right. And so I think from that standpoint, it's key. But also on the opportunity zone side, there's a very realistic scenario where we do 30 transactions, 29 are good, 1 is bad, and we collect that guarantee payment from Kresge, and then a portion of the proceeds from Kresge go towards repaying your loan, which they're not guaranteeing the county, but they are providing a guarantee at the fund level, and proceeds from that guarantee would be able, they are designed to replenish a shortfall in the fund so that we can repay our investors.
So while we do not have a direct guarantee, there's a collateral coverage for the entire fund.
Kresge is guaranteeing up to $15 million of losses at the fund level. So if we had, one deal that lost 10 and one that lost 5, we would submit insurance claims and they would be obligated to reimburse 15.
And so our 1.5 wouldn't all be in one deal.
You have the benefit of portfolio diversification. Kresge pays out on the instance of one loss. So Kresge is a much riskier position than a cash loan investor like Cuyahoga County. They're providing an insurance guarantee where all that has to happen is one deal goes bad and then they have an obligation to pay. If one deal goes bad with Cuyahoga County, the expectation is that the profits generated from the rest of the portfolio would fill up the hole that was left by that one default loss.
I just
Ms. Simon?
wanted to just make one other point that's related to this. Mr. Tower and Mr. Oseji can talk about the typical loan deployment they made in Michigan, but I think we haven't talked about, and I need to say on the record, that our Cuyahoga County's capital investment will only be deployed to Cuyahoga-based companies. So even though it's going into a fund, that fund, our dollars are going to be deployed here, not in Maine or Michigan or the other market areas. So just as you think about kind of risk.
No, I did get that,
You
but
did
I
get that,
was
okay.
just concerned that we didn't have, if, for example, our full principal was loaned out, what was the risk that we were absorbing? Are we going to see most of that principal come back? Because we are the public sector and we do take risks, but getting as much of our principal back to reinvest it time and time over and over again is the goal.
Yeah. I think it's unknown at the moment because we haven't launched it yet. Before we meet again, maybe we can run a couple of models and scenarios beyond what Mr. Hurdick showed you. So those were high level aggregate scenarios, and we haven't really evaluated the pipeline to see what companies and what the risk.
So I tend to personally want to be greedy, and I want both the tax income from the economic impact as well as our principal back.
No, of course.
That's not greedy, that's prudent. Ms. Simon? And the chair's gonna have to apologize because I have another commitment that I had. I didn't realize we were gonna be running all the way up past to 5 o'clock, so if
I have to go as well, but just one quick question
Sure.
to the principal since they're here about each individual loan made through the fund. Did I hear that the county has some input on that, or we just lose total control on once we loan the money to the fund? It's up to the.
Our proposal is that we really handle the underwriting measurements.
Yeah.
So we're going to think about debt service coverage ratios and things like that. Where we request the county's close participation is in identifying what types of transactions and what types of industries we should be focusing on. What are the objectives of this program? And then to look at how we're performing and to say, okay, we invested in this company, it's created 50 jobs, we thought it was going to create 60, why? And let's talk about that. But we want that kind of anticipation. But as far as involving the public sector in the underwriting process on a loan-by-loan basis, it's generally not a good formula, speaking from experience, but I welcome input and yeah.
Okay, I don't have experience in this, so I'm asking a question. And why, and is it all at once? Can't the counties invest half and see how this goes? I mean, this is quite a risk without the Kresge fully guaranteeing principle as I see it. I'm not sure we really, so why is it all at once? I mean, do you have this many projects, in the pipe? Just a question.
I think just to be candid, the program is small enough that it needs to grow at this point. So, we just did a $50 million commitment to Maine and 25 to Baltimore. I think we're doing 10 as a starting point here. $1.5 million will go into one loan. So we want to grow this with other foundation partners and make it larger. But we are calling capital on an as needed basis, on a pro rata basis. So when we call capital, we're going to say we're doing this loan. And we're going to show what that loan is. We're happy to be very open book. I don't think the public sector wants to be involved in the direct underwriting decision for your reasons as well as ours.
Sorry. So we confirm.
We're going to come back to this. There's no way we're going to get this wrapped up today here.
County will be involved in the no-go for us from a social impact standpoint. So one, and then, ma'am, to your question, I would also view your 1.1 to 1.5 as being that catalytic capital that unlocks others, and which others meaning gun, but there are also several other groups as well that are that we're in talks with now, and then we will leverage those as well. So it's a, to use a bad phrase, a mushroom of effect.
Okay, we've got two quick questions. I have to be at a manufacturing meeting at 5:30. Ms. Baker, you're first.
Can I just ask quickly? Do we go outside the opportunity zone? Did I hear you say that?
Yeah, I think I said that. Yeah.
You did say that, and I guess not now, but I'd like to know why you would go outside the opportunity zone if that's where we find we need the.
We have two funds. So the Opportunity Zone Fund will invest strictly in opportunity zones. The Arctaris Impact Fund will invest in low to moderate income census tract, with emphasis on severely distressed tracts.
And the main reason why is because we want to make sure that we put the capital to work as quickly as possible. Obviously, making sure that they meet our underwriting process.
And Mr. Miller?
Talk more about that.
Yeah, we're not going to get this wrapped up today, and I do have to take off. So,
my question was why there's no mention of racial or social disparity as one of the social impact criteria.
Always great questions, Mr. Miller. So that's just not something that is currently in our social impact framework with our partners, but it's something that obviously we've talked about and everybody's committed to. And actually, the Workforce Board just is in the process of adopting. So if you feel that's important, we're happy to discuss that with the Arctaris team and our partners.
These zones are heavily
That's right, by default.
involved.
Yeah.
And if
And
you
just
look
go
at
back to Ms. Baker's question quickly, Mr. Chairman, is we felt it important because we didn't get all of our opportunity zones that we submitted to the state designated, that we have some flexibility to invest in other areas that were reminded time and time again by our non-Cleveland partners there's poverty that exist outside of Cleveland. So the majority of the zones, as you know, are in the city.
And I have to
so we got-
apologize because I've got to be someplace over back. So you guys can talk offline. You're welcome. Adjourn the meeting, so it doesn't mean you.
Thank you very much, Chairman.